Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, an HOA Karen accuses me of faking my disability and then destroys my wheelchair ramp. Before we start, please check out my podcast on all major podcast platforms by searching for Ripe Stories, and you will get early access to all the daily videos and exclusive stories that you won't find anywhere else. And the first one starts like this. So I'm a disabled guy who needs a wheelchair to get around. My boyfriend and I moved in this neighborhood almost a year ago, and it's been quite the journey. My boyfriend's family, who lives nearby, have been absolute stars in helping us settle in. They even installed a ramp in our driveway so I can easily move around and do my work. Especially when my boyfriend is out. As much as I try to focus on the positive, there are a few neighbors who just cannot seem to accept me for who I am. I'm well aware that my disability might be part of the reason that they look down on me, but it stings me even more because I know my sexuality plays a role too. It was just a few months after we moved when this pesky neighbor's mother came back from whatever trip she had gone to. According to the neighbor who is friendly to us, this woman, who was by every definition a Karen, was part of this neighborhood's HOA and has been a nightmare for almost everyone. We had been discussing if we should become part of this HOA, but after hearing about her behavior, we decided to not go through with it. But that didn't mean this Karen, or her HOA, would leave us alone. One sunny afternoon, my boyfriend and I were watering the plants in our yard and having a playful water fight when Karen came marching over to our property. She started loudly complaining to my boyfriend about how we were disturbing the peace in the neighborhood. She then looked straight at me in my wheelchair and had the nerve to say, "If you have enough strength to get down and dirty with your boyfriend, then you should stop pretending to be disabled." Now that was way out of line, and it made me hate her and her HOA minions even more. My boyfriend, bless his heart, stood up for me and told her to F off. But things escalated quickly after Karen tripped over the ramp while walking away. She started throwing all kinds of homophobic and ableist slurs my way. It was infuriating to say the least. My boyfriend, who was already fuming, warned Karen that if she ever dares say anything like this to me again, he would contact the police. Karen, clearly not expecting things to go to the cops, sputtered for words before attempting to save face. She threatened to call the cops on us first, claiming that we were being indecent in public. The damn audacity, I swear. After that incident with Karen, she and her family seemed to steer clear of us. I convinced my boyfriend not to file a case, but we did decide to talk to the neighbors who had been kind towards us to keep them in the loop. As summer rolled in, we noticed Karen and her family packing their bags and leaving. They looked like they were heading for a vacation, and honestly, part of me was relieved that they would be away for a while, because my boyfriend also had to leave for a few weeks due to work commitments. My boyfriend's parents and sister dropped by often, making sure I did not feel lonely in his absence. The week leading up to my boyfriend's return was relatively quiet, but that peace did not last long as Karen's family returned. That day I had planned to water the plants in the yard, but their arrival made me hesitate. I know it was cowardly and I didn't like that I was trying to hide from her, so I talked to my boyfriend about the situation and he was as supportive as ever. He assured me that his sister would come over to provide moral support, and he advised me to carry a pepper spray just in case I felt threatened. The next day I was ready for the confrontation, but thankfully Karen did not approach me. She did notice me, and I could see her murmuring something to her HOA friends who were hanging out in front of her property. In the end, I watered my plants in peace, and also my boyfriend's sister arrived soon after and offered to drive me to her parents' place so I can spend some time with them. I was all too happy to accept, and it was then that Karen and her friends approached us like some hungry hyenas. As Karen kept coming way too close to me, my boyfriend's sister stepped between me and her. My boyfriend's sister, "Back up, what do you need?" Karen, "Couldn't you people get a better ramp than this piece of junk? Not only is his wheelchair an eyesore, this ramp is equally ugly." My boyfriend's sister, "Sorry, the Barbie-themed ramp we ordered is still in the making." Karen, "Oh, you got a mouth on you, huh? Your brother brought this ugly disabled idiot into our neighborhood, disturbed our peace, and made this whole place look cheap, and you have the audacity to talk back?" My boyfriend's sister, "I have the audacity to do much more than talk back, you hack." As much as I appreciated my boyfriend's sister standing up for me, it was clear that we were outnumbered by Karen and her friends. I gently touched her wrists, silently signaling to her to end the conversation. Thankfully, she got the message and headed straight to the driver's seat even as Karen and her friends continued to mock us. I wanted to get away as soon as possible and help myself into the seat with the help of my legs. And yes, I could still use my legs, not for walking or standing too long, but many disabled people have small tasks their limbs can do despite their condition. I didn't even look back as I closed the door and we drove away, hopefully to return to a better day tomorrow. Sadly, no such thing happened, and when I returned home the next morning, I found my wheelchair ramp completely destroyed. My boyfriend's dad had come to drop me off, and when he saw the ruins, I suggested to ask the neighbors if they knew anything, but he immediately went to the Karen's house and told me to stay here. I tried to stop him, but he had already walked away and banged loudly on Karen's door. I could see Karen come out and start screaming at him, but he shouted back. My boyfriend's dad, "Who do you think you are to destroy my son's property? Karen, your son is faking his disability. I saw him stand up on his 2 legs yesterday. He's pretending to be disabled just to get sympathy and attention. I will not let him fool and devalue my neighborhood that he decided to barge in." My boyfriend's dad, "We will see how long this remains your neighborhood." He then walked away even as Karen came out of her house and followed him. He wheeled me inside the house and told me to call the cops, that I immediately did. I could hear shouting outside, and it seemed like Karen had gathered her HOA minions and was trying to force my dad to apologize, or she would file a case on me for breaking the HOA rules. The only issue is, we are not even a part of it. The police arrived in about 15 minutes, during which my boyfriend's dad had come inside and sat beside me. He held my hand as they shook slightly and told me to sue Karen, everything else he would manage. I nodded, and when the police arrived, Karen was quick to approach them and say how I was fooling everyone and doing indecent things with my boyfriend in public. My boyfriend's dad intervened and told Karen to shut up before gesturing towards me. I took a deep breath and told the police officer everything that had happened since Karen came back. We also had the recording from the cameras that we showed them and even presented our neighbors as witnesses. We were told to file a report in the station, and my boyfriend's dad agreed to drive me there. As this all happened, Karen continuously tried to interrupt us and paint me as the bad guy, so the police asked her to come to the station as well. She looked pale at the mention of police station and, as we had predicted, did not arrive. Instead, she sent someone from the HOA. As I had all the evidences against her and some other members of the HOA breaking the ramp in the early morning, Karen was sentenced to jail. Since this whole incident involved other HOA members, they too were sent behind bars and the whole HOA got dissolved. My boyfriend was there the next day when police officers came to arrest Karen. She was making a scene, screaming and shouting slurs at me, showing everyone what kind of a person she was. Her family accused us of bribing the police and threatened to take this matter to court. However, no letter ever arrived at our doorstep, and after a few months the family moved away for good. And yeah guys, if you enjoyed this content, then please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and maybe even leave a comment, because that would help me tremendously. Either way, the next one is titled "Karen Set Fire to My Barn After Declaring It an Eyesore. She Thinks She Owns My Entire Farm." So I've lived on the same farmland for as long as I can remember. My parents raised me here and their parents before them. This land has been a part of my family's identity and livelihood for generations. But despite the farm being in my family for over a century, our neighbor Karen seems to think she owns the place. So she is a middle-aged woman who inherited her property next door from her parents, but seems to feel entitled to even more. Ever since we first met her, Karen has been trying to exert authority over my family and our farm. She complains about the noise of our farm equipment and animals despite living next to working farmland. She insists on being consulted about any changes we make to the property, even minor ones. And if we dare to disagree with her ridiculous demands, she threatens to report us to the authorities. For years we humored her and tried to remain civil, but Karen's sense of entitlement only grew worse. She started randomly walking onto our land uninvited, criticizing our farming practices and insisting that we make improvements she deemed necessary. When we told her to leave our farm, she threw a tantrum and actually called the cops on us for harassing her. A confrontation with the cops finally made it clear to Karen that she had no claim over our farm, but her hostility did not subside. Then a few weeks ago, her spiteful behavior escalated into something truly evil. She marched right up to our barn and declared that it was an eyesore that needed to be demolished at once. When my father explained that the barn was over 100 years old and a historical landmark, Karen told him he had no taste and that she would take care of the issue herself. That night, while my family was asleep, Karen snuck onto our property in the dead of night and set fire to our barn. The massive blaze was spotted by a neighbor, who called the fire department, but by the time they arrived, the old wooden barn was nearly reduced to ashes. Thankfully, none of our animals were inside at the time, but all our farming equipment, tools and decades worth of belongings were destroyed. When the police and fire investigators questioned the neighbors, they discovered the security footage of Karen sneaking onto our farm right before the fire started. When the police confronted her the next day, she claimed that she did us a favor by burning down this eyesore that was supposedly lowering property values all around. We were absolutely livid. Not only had Karen destroyed a central part of our farm and family history, but she showed no remorse. She truly believed that she had the right to decide what happened on our land, and even if it meant committing arson. We pressed charges for arson, trespassing and destruction of property, and Karen is now facing years in prison if convicted, but no sentence will ever repair the damage done or bring back what we lost. The barn may have been old and imperfect in Karen's eyes, but to us it symbolized a lifetime of cherished memories and represented our family's humble beginnings. But in one spiteful act, Karen sought to erase our history simply because it didn't align with her own idea of beauty. Some people think that just because something doesn't directly affect them, they have no responsibility towards it. But true beauty comes not only from what one chooses to preserve, but what one chooses to respect. And some things like family history, tradition and heirlooms are far too precious to be destroyed by the whims of selfish entitlement. Update to the story: it's been a few months since Karen set fire to my family's barn. The police investigation and ensuing court case moved swiftly given the clear evidence against her. Several neighbors came forward to testify about Karen's pattern of encroachment and entitlement over the years. Karen pleaded not guilty, claiming that she didn't start the fire and that we had no proof it was her. However, when presented with the security footage showing her trespassing right before the blaze started, she changed her story. She began insisting that she did us a favor by burning down an eyesore on our property, thinking it would somehow justify her crime. The judge was not at all convinced by Karen's reasoning, pointing out that her actions were clearly illegal regardless of her subjective opinion of our barn. In the end, Karen was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 5 years in prison. She has also been ordered to pay fines and restitution for the damage caused. However, no amount of money or punishment will truly make up for what we lost. Our barn may have been old and worn, but it held irreplaceable memories and represented the history of our family farm. While Karen's comeuppance gave me some sense of justice, it does little to ease the grief I feel over the loss of our barn. My father in particular has taken the news hard, as that barn held many memories of his childhood and time spent working alongside his own father. Even now, as I walk around our farm, I catch glimpses of where the barn used to stand, only to be met with emptiness. Despite this, my family has decided to move forward in a positive manner. We are currently in the process of rebuilding an even better barn that will honor the history of the original while incorporating modern improvements. And the next one is titled Family Drama. So I, 25 female, went out for dinner for my sister-in-law's 28 female bachelorette party this past weekend. Between my sister-in-law and my husband, 26 male, sister-in-law has always been the golden child of the family. Growing up, my in-laws coddled her and gave her everything that she wanted, while my husband always got the crappy end of the stick. She was always the popular girl in school, cheerleader, lots of friends, all the boys loved her. While my husband was always a little more nerdy and got picked on quite a bit, even my in-laws would give him a hard time about this and say he needed to be more like his sister. While fast forward to today, both my husband and I went to top schools, got our degrees, and currently have very well-paying jobs in tech. I'm not trying to sound braggy, this is just for context, but we live a very comfortable life. Sister-in-law still currently lives at home with my in-laws, where they foot all of her bills. She had my niece, 4 female, with her ex and is currently on marriage number 2. This past weekend I was invited to this fancy upscale restaurant in my city for my sister-in-law's bachelorette party. She just wanted to do a nice dinner. There were 8 of us in total. At the end of the dinner, the bill comes out and the waiter hands it to me. I'm sitting there confused for a second until sister-in-law speaks up and is all, "My parents and I were talking and were thinking, you and my brother can handle the bill for this as a wedding gift, and since you're not financially contributing to my wedding." I stared at her, shocked for a moment, and was like, "And you didn't think to bring this up to me beforehand?" She started going off about how we are so well off, what's the big deal, and she is sure her brother would not have an issue with it. I asked her why her fiancé does not foot the bill, or my in-laws, and where in her right mind she thinks it's okay to spring this on me. She started going on about how we are the wealthiest in both her and her fiancé's family, and that she did not think I would act like this and would say yes. I told her, well, sorry, but I'm not your parents. Don't expect handouts from me. She called me selfish and I called her an entitled brat, paid for my half of the bill, and then left. Well, as expected, my mother-in-law, sister-in-law, and even some of the cousin and aunts on my husband's side have been absolutely furious with me and are expecting me to apologize for the comments. I told them over my dead body. Husband is 100% on my side and we are debating on not going to the wedding. I was talking to my mom and she thinks I took it too far with the comments and should just apologize to keep the peace. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Someone on Reddit said, not the a-hole, don't apologize. No matter how much money you make, you are not expected to 1. Contribute to your sister-in-law's wedding, what the hell? Foot the bill for an entire bachelorette party that you were attending as a guest, de-escalate her temper tantrum once she didn't get her way, and the burden of payment for a bachelorette party usually falls on the maid of honor and bridesmaid and arranged for ahead of time or the bride. Comment number 2. Not the a-hole, I guarantee you were only invited as a setup to try and make you pay. Don't go to the wedding, and I would honestly consider how much contact you want to maintain with sister-in-law and your in-laws moving forward. It's clear that they see you two as nothing but an ATM. Next one is titled, The Best Revenge You Will Ever Hear. So I grew up in a single-parent family, my mom, me and my older sister who, for this story's sake, I will call Lilith. Lilith is 4 years older than me, so the main reason I believe she was the way she was because she grew up an only child with both our parents spoiling her and giving her everything she wanted. Then I came along and she was not the baby anymore. Then when I was 2, my parents divorced and my dad moved away and my mom was left alone with us. My sister was and still is a grade A bitch. When I was growing up, she used to bully me relentlessly. She would call me names, break my stuff, blame my parents' divorce on me, and even physically abuse me until I got old enough to hit back. At school, she used to get all her friends to bully me as well, and because a bunch of older kids were always cornering me, calling me fat and ugly, I never had any friends. No one wanted to be anywhere near me because of her, and she always made a point of letting me know just how much better than me she was. When I was younger, I believed she was better. She was prettier, wore better clothes, had a ton of friends and was into girly stuff like makeup and fashion, while I was still in my teddy bear Barbie stage. You could just tell me that this is all stupid kid stuff, but it only got worse as we got older. By the time she was 16, I was just turning 12 and the bullying had never ceased. Because of the type of person I was, I thought that if I did everything she said, she might actually like me, but this only encouraged her to take advantage of me. Just like this meowing cat is taking advantage of me. And by the way guys, my apologies, it started raining really heavily just now, so you might hear that in the recording. Either way, things like cleaning her side of our room, getting her drinks, making her food, doing any housework mom asked her to do, and even giving her my pocket money were completely normal. But despite not doing everything she said, she was always nasty and not just to me. One of the worst memories I have of my sister is her screaming at my mom because she could not get the prom dress she wanted. I watched my mom try to explain that she did not have the money to afford the dress she asked for and that she would have to get a cheaper one. Lilith blew up on my mom, telling her they would have the money if dad was still here, and it was all her fault that he left and she should not suffer because mom was too lazy to get a real job. This really struck a chord with me because even when I was younger, I always noticed how tired my mom always was. She worked 2 jobs just to get us by, and for Lilith to act that way and say things like that really got to me. She made my mom cry that night and I've never forgiven her for it. Sometime later and my mom was dating this guy, we shall call him Matt. Matt was, and still is, great. He was really nice to all of us, bought us presents, made a point to get to know us, even took both me and Lilith on separate days out so we could both spend some alone time with him, which always made me feel special. I was 13 when they got married and we moved in with him. Matt made quite a lot of money, so both Lilith and I now had separate bedrooms and I could not have been happier. Enter Matt's son. Our mastermind, we shall refer to him as Megamind. I had met Megamind a few times before my mom got married to his dad, but never really got to know him. He was older than me but younger than Lilith, so when we moved into his house I was terrified that Mega would be like Lilith. However, I was completely wrong. Mega was and still is the best brother. He never made me feel like I was unwanted. He let me play on his consoles, got me into reading, helped me with my homework, and even encouraged me to make friends, knowing how my sister's treatment of me affected my trust in people. Mega was the sibling I always wanted and never got to have. And Lilith just kind of faded into the background for a while. Then some years later, Mega brought a friend home from university. His name shall be Nick. Nick and Mega were best friends. They did practically everything together and had the truest bromance of any two men I've ever met, but there was evil lurking. Evil that wished to break the bromance forever. The first time Lilith saw Nick, I swear there were stars in her eyes and she had to capture this innocent soul into her trap by any means necessary. And of course, poor Nick. Poor Nick. Despite both me and Mega telling him repeatedly what kind of a person she was, Lily entranced this innocent poor boy with her looks and her charms, and they soon started dating. Soon, whenever Nick would come over to the house to hang out with Mega, Lilith would show up and drag him away, making it all about her. She started arguments with Mega about spending too much time with her boyfriend and that he needed to stop and leave them alone, to which Mega always laughed in her face and told her, not too kindly, to F off. Mega was not like me. He did not take any crap and I deeply respected him for that. However, this evil demon was not used to being disrespected and so she hatched a wicked plan. She started trying to separate Mega and Nick. If Nick came over to be with Mega, she would always make him feel guilty about not spending enough time with her. She would start fights with Mega and then act like the poor victim over texts to Nick. Nick would then call Mega, all upset and angry, and Mega would try to explain that Lilith was just trying to manipulate him. All of this I saw as a spectator. Mega would tell me every time Lilith did something sneaky to try and break his friendship with Nick, and I believed everything she said because I knew what kind of a person she was. Then one day, Lilith and Mega had a massive fight. Our parents had gone on a couples weekend getaway and had left Lilith in charge since she was the oldest. I was about 15 at this time, while Mega was 19 and Lilith was 20. Because she was the one in charge, she got given the money we were supposed to use for food, but of course, Lilith took the money for herself and bought a bunch of crap just for her, including, I remember, a pair of gold high-heel shoes. They were pretty, but we could not eat them. Mega blew up on Lilith and Lilith shouted back that she was older, better and deserved it. Mega got our parents on the phone, told them what happened, and they ripped into Lilith, telling her to give her pocket money to Mega so he could look after us and buy us food for the weekend. Lilith shouted and cried but eventually gave in, never having successfully manipulated Matt in her life. She handed the money to Mega with a snarl and then spent the next few hours on the phone to Nick, wailing about how we were both being mean to her while our parents were away and could she please stay at his house so she would not be bullied anymore. Nick came running and started screaming at Mega for, quote, taking Lilith's money and getting her into trouble. Meanwhile, Lilith stood behind Nick with a smug look on her face while Mega was trying to explain. Nick then yells that Mega's been against their relationship from the beginning and he didn't know what Mega's problem was, but if he was forcing him to choose between him and Lilith, he chose his girlfriend. Now, I know a lot of you will call Nick stupid, but don't. I know how manipulative Lilith could be. She was a master at making people feel sorry for her and getting them on her side even when she was horrible to them, just like she did with me. That night I had to listen to Mega cry for the first time since I knew him, and I had enough. I knocked on his door, asked him if he was alright, we ordered a pizza and we started to plot. Mega was rather defeated by this point, but I told him that if his friendship with Nick meant anything, he had to get him away from that demon spawn before he lost his friend for good. And so we plotted. Lilith spent the entire weekend with Nick and came back all happy and smug, rubbing it in Mega's face that Nick had chosen her, but via our plan, Nick said nothing back and acted defeated and let her talk. For the next few weeks, that is all she did. Whenever Nick came over to the house, she would spend time with him in her room, and when he would leave, she would prance around Mega, bragging about how much Nick loved her and asking Mega snidely if he missed his little friend. Every time she did this, her focus was entirely on Mega. She never once looked at me, and that was her biggest mistake. Finally, the day of her 21st birthday had arrived. Nick and Mega had not spoken in weeks, and the few times Nick had gingerly tried to make things up with Mega, Lilith would walk in screaming about how he had already chosen her and that if he wanted to be friends with Mega again, then their relationship was over. Nick would always look miserable, but would side with her nonetheless. Mega had had enough. The fact that Lilith was making his best friend so unhappy purely for her own selfishness snapped something in him, and he told me it was time to put our plan into action. This was where my part of our plan finally took the center stage. For her 21st birthday, she had arranged to have her party at the house since it was huge and more than enough space for all of her university friends. Our parents had agreed, but only under the condition that there was no underage drinking and that both Mega and I were allowed to stay in the house. My sister reluctantly agreed, and thus the plan was in motion. On the morning of her birthday, I knocked on her bedroom door. She looked annoyed to see me and asked me snidely, "What do you want?" I innocently told her that I had the best idea. I told her that I wanted to record her for her 21st birthday. I wanted to record her getting ready with her friends, talking about her plans after leaving university, record all her friends at the party, and then set up the recording on a big projector Matt had in his office so everyone could see it. This was before the time where smartphones were everywhere, so recording yourself was still something of a novelty, and I was using an old-fashioned camcorder I had gotten a few birthdays ago. Now, despite the fact that she did not like me, her wrath had been focused on Mega for so long that she most likely never saw me as a threat. And because of this, both her and her friends seemed to love the idea. I spent the entire morning with them, recording them all getting ready, putting on their makeup, and of course introducing themselves to the camera. My sister was lapping it up. She looked into that camera's eye like she was a supermodel movie star, preening and talking loudly about her successful future and how amazing her birthday party was going to be. That day I reverted back to my old role as a servant, fetched her and her friends drinks and food, and made a grand show of complimenting all of them, and also telling them how amazing they looked on camera and that they could all be actresses one day. They were loving it, so the party starts and my sister told me to stay out of the way. I told her innocently that it was no problem, that I would just stay in my room all night, edit the recordings and come down to set up the camcorder when she was ready, because I wanted this night to be perfect for her. Satisfied with my answer, she left my room and I did exactly what I said I would do. I edited my recordings and a few hours later one of her friends came to my room and told me she was ready. I set up the projector in the large living room, connected it to Matt's computer and started playing the recordings for all her guests to see. The first part of the recordings were exactly what I promised. My sister and her friends introducing themselves and laughing in her bedroom as they had been hours earlier. I looked at my sister, who seemed so satisfied that all the attention was on her, and then I looked at Mega, who was hiding in the corner of the room, and gave him a subtle thumbs up. Then the video started to change. It started to playing clips of Lilith shouting at Mega, calling him names and taunting him about Nick. It started showing Lilith snidely telling Mega that Nick belonged to her and that she was going to do her best to make Nick hate Mega so that they would never be friends again. It even showed clips of Lilith bragging about all the lies she had told Nick and how he was so gullible. Every single argument I had recorded without her knowledge I had edited into this video. Everyone in the party was watching silently as Lilith's true self was exposed in clip after clip, while Lilith stood there frozen, completely unable to comprehend what was going on. When she finally snapped out of it, she turned on me and started screaming, yelling at me and asking me, "How could you do this?" I never said a word, I just smiled. When the recording stopped, Mega turned the lights on and everyone was staring at Lilith. Clearly having no defense, she let out a loud cry and stormed up to her room, slamming the door so hard everyone heard it. The next day, Mega told me Nick had apologized for everything and that he was stupid to so blindly believe everything she said. He even told me that Nick had thanked me specifically for helping him see what a monster my sister truly was. When my parents came home, both Mega and I were grounded for ruining Lilith's birthday and for using Matt's stuff without permission. But neither of us cared. Mega got his best friend back, and a few months later, Lilith moved out since after seeing the recordings of her behavior, my parents were disgusted by her and they had absolutely no problems with showing it. Since she no longer had any leverage over anyone in the house, she packed her bags and moved to stay in one of her college dorms. I've never had any problems with my sister since, and to this day, Mega and I are as close as two siblings can be and always laugh about the time we defeated the demon and saved us all from its clutches. Update: thank you so much for the support and the gold. For everyone asking what happened next, well, Mega and Nick are still best friends, and Mega was the best man at Nick's wedding, and before you ask, yes, he learned his lesson about dating witches. His wife is sweet as a cherry drop. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.